The man wanted to take a sip of water while on the plane, but he suddenly noticed that his fingernails were quickly turning black. He realized that this was a phenomenon caused by extreme lack of oxygen in the heart and lungs. However, before he could come up with a countermeasure, the bottle in his hand quickly twisted and deformed. At this moment, the flight attendant also sensed that something was wrong. She quickly sat in her seat, fastened her seatbelt, and called on the passengers to fasten their seatbelts as well. However, the next second, the plane entered a turbulent air layer. Instantly, the water in the water cup floated up, and the passengers who hadn't had time to fasten their seatbelts were sucked into the air by the strong air current due to the loss of pressure. In an instant, the entire cabin began to shake violently. The passengers were terrified when they saw the scene. In order to survive, they could only hold on to the armrests tightly. At this time, the captain also realized the crisis, and quickly put on an oxygen mask for himself. Due to the loss of pressure in the cabin, the oxygen masks above the passengers' heads popped out. Seeing this, the passengers quickly put on the oxygen masks and inhaled oxygen. But Jack's wife hadn't had time to inhale oxygen before she fainted due to poor breathing. At this moment, a girl was using the toilet in the restroom, but the violent jolting made her unable to open the door. Finally, she fainted on the ground in a state of oxygen deficiency. In order to save his wife, Jack went to the position where the flight attendants worked. He found a bottle of emergency oxygen in the emergency room, and quickly put it on his wife, which saved his unconscious wife from the crisis of death. After a violent jolt, the pressure in the cabin returned to normal. The captain informed the cabin immediately. It turned out that when the plane passed through the air current just now, it encountered a storm, causing a seal on the plane to be damaged, which led to the problem with the pressure in the cabin. Now they had already made emergency treatments. At this time, the passengers finally breathed a sigh of relief, and soon the flight attendant found the girl who had fainted in the toilet just now. She quickly brought emergency oxygen and put it on the girl. The girl miraculously woke up. They thought that the disaster had finally ended. However, at this time, many people on the plane encountered strange things one after another. A middle-aged uncle suddenly felt that he couldn't catch his breath. Lisa quickly used the public address system to ask if there were any doctors who could help. Jack rushed over after hearing the announcement. But at this time, the uncle's condition was getting worse and worse. He kept digging into his mouth with his fingers. The others didn't know what he was going to do. Suddenly, a stream of blood spurted out of the uncle's mouth. Then his whole body began to twitch, but soon he stopped moving. Jack found that the uncle had stopped breathing. The captain immediately reported the matter to the ground control tower. Since it would still take an hour to reach the destination, the flight crew had to transfer the body to the business class on the second floor, and covered the deceased with a blanket. However, a young man secretly sneaked to the second floor. It turned out that when the flight crew carried the body just now, he noticed that the deceased was wearing a gold watch on his hand. He wanted to secretly take the gold watch away, but after the young man pulled off the gold watch, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he took out his phone to take a photo as a souvenir. He even began to insult the deceased. As a result, the next second, the body turned its head. Then the body stood up. The next second, the young man let out a shrill scream.